Grinspoon are Aussie rock legends with a career spanning the better part of 3 decades with a truly impressive 8-album run with every album charting in the top 10. Grinspoon's Guide to Better Living is one of the best rock albums to come out of Australia. Despite a stylistic shift to a more mainstream sound after 2 albums, Grinspoon were unstoppable in the late 90s and early 2000s with enormous hits at home including Chemical Heart and Lost Control. Stay a while as I take you through the rise of Grinspoon. To understand how Grinspoon became so popular, we have to go all the way back to 95. Phil Jameson and Christian Hopes had been playing together for years in a band called Crabapple that didn't go anywhere, and studied music at Southern Cross Uni where Christian's dad taught drums. All 4 members met at the Golan Hotel in Lismore for a jam night that Pat Davin and Joe Hansen were running with Christian's dad to make ends meet in Lismore. Pat played guitar, Joe played bass, Christian played drums and Phil sang, playing rhythm guitar where needed. This was Grinspoon's very first show. What's so impressive about Grinspoon is that they haven't had a single lineup change over their entire career. There was clearly a unique chemistry between the members right from the beginning. All they needed was a name. The name Grinspoon was taken from Lester Grinspoon, who was an associate professor at Harvard Medical School who supported marijuana for medical use. 3 weeks after forming, the boys recorded a 2-track demo and entered the Triple J Unearthed competition. Grinspoon won the competition with Sick Fest, with the other song on the demo being More Than You Are. Sick Fest was the first song that Pat and Phil had written together. More Than You Are is one of my all-time favourite Grinspoon songs. The band's first formal release in August of 95 was a self-titled EP with 6 tracks, also known as the Green EP. The EP was recorded in Grevillea Studios in Brisbane and released through an indie label called Oracle Records. Early new metal influences on Grinspoon were Helmet and Prong. Despite the EP containing More Than You Are and Sick Fest, it wasn't Grinner's ticket to fame and kind of burst their bubble after being knocked back by Frontier when the band were looking for an agent. The boys didn't let a lack of commercial success get in their way, but between a shitload of touring with the Screaming Jets, Grinspoon were writing EP number 2. With enough cash saved up, Grinners took off to Ultimo Studios in Sydney, this time with Phil McKellar in July of 96. Phil McKellar provided superior production with far better sound quality. Around this time, the band signed to a label called Grudge. In December of 96, Liquor Bottle Cozy released containing Post-Inebriated Anxiety and Champion. The EP charted at 65 and was the breakthrough they were looking for. While Post-Inebriated Anxiety is a great song, it really has nothing on Champion. From the opening bass line to the wall of distorted, hard-hitting, simple but catchy guitar riffs, Champion is another all-time favourite of mine. This EP was a taste of what was to come in the not-too-distant future, opening up doors for the band at home and over in the States. After the band's second EP, more touring followed at home, with writing taking place for their debut full-length album. In February of 97, Grinspoon hit the studio with Phil McKellar, with recording taking place at Rocking Horse Studio in Byron Bay. Ulrich Wilde assisted McKellar with production. 2 singles released in July and August, which were Pedestrian and Dead Cat 3 times. Dead Cat peaked at 50 and came in at number 34 on Triple J's Hottest 100 list for 97. Guide to Better Living, released in September of 97 under the Grudge label, hitting the charts at number 11. In 2017, the album was re-released and charted at number 8. The debut was a huge success, going double platinum at home with more than 140,000 units sold. Critics provided positive responses. Whenever I'm in the mood to listen to early Grinspoon, this is my go-to album. There isn't a single song worth skipping. If I had to pick a top 5 songs from this album, they'd be Pressure Tested 1984, Dead Cat, and Pedestrian for how heavy they are, and Just Ace for how fun and catchy it is, and Champion for the reasons I listed before. Despite extensive touring across North America through 97 and 98 with bands including Creed and Anthrax, the album only shifted a mere 12,000 copies. At home in September of 98, Grinners put out EP number 3, titled Pushing Buttons, with production handled by McKellar and Wilde again. The 6-track EP contained Black Friday and More Than You Are, 2 awesome hard-hitting rock songs, with a few others including a cover of Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck. The EP charted at 13 and went gold. More commercial success for the band. This EP wasn't released in the US. In 98, Universal Records in the States signed the band, releasing an altered version of the album in March of 99, removing songs like Just Ace, adding additional songs including More Than You Are, and rearranging the order, which is absolutely criminal given how good this album is in its original form. The justification behind these changes was to try to make a breakthrough into North America by appealing to closed-minded radio stations that were focusing on new metal at the time. Grinspoon's sound was too hard to put into the right basket. There are similarities here with Countryman Regurgitator. The United States was a hard market to crack for Aussie bands that don't really fit a mould. Given the huge success of Guide to Better Living at home, a follow-up was in order. Easy was released in November of '99 under the Universal label, with production handled by Jonathan Burnside, who had worked with Nirvana previously. The album charted at number 4, going platinum, selling half as many units as their debut. Critics were happy with the album scoring around the 7.5 stars mark. Ready One, released as the first single before the album, charting at 36. Another album with so many good songs. Out of the 15 songs, there are only perhaps 3 that don't do anything for me, including Overdriver due to it being instrumental and overly long, Dial Tone, and Fuckwit. If I had to pick a top 5 favourites off of Easy, they would be Ready One, Secrets, Rock Show, Better Off Dead, and Violent and Lazy. Better Off Dead is right up there as one of Grinspoon's best songs on the heavy side, with its fast tempo in the verses with a simple but crushing riff in the chorus that'll have you banging your head. Ready One found its way into the 33rd spot in Triple J's Hottest 100 for '99. Rock Show and Secrets came in at 33 and 73 at Triple J's Hottest 100 for the year 2000. Easy also received 2 nominations at the ARIAs for Best Rock Album and Engineer of the Year. A supporting tour took place right across Australia and in the US on the Warped Tour. After 3 EPs and 2 albums, the band needed a well-earned break at the start of 2000. Touring commenced again through the back half of 2000. After careful consideration, the band wanted to head in a new direction for Album 3. Production for Album 3 took 5 months as the studio that they were recording at was shut down, with recording and production moved to smaller studios. New Detention was released in June of 2002 under the Grudge label, with production handled by McKellar again. Chemical Heart released as the lead single, peaking at 25. This single was a pretty clear indication of the more mainstream radio rock sound the band was aiming for. New Detention charted at number 2 and went double platinum, shifting a similar amount of units as Guide to Better Living. Critics were fond of the album. However, some fans were upset with the band changing up their sound to chase further commercial success. The band insisted that this change was a natural progression and an improvement. All 4 singles appeared in Triple J's Hottest 100 of 2002. These singles were Chemical Heart, Lost Control, No Reason, and 1,000 Miles, all of which are great songs. The only song that I kind of could do without of this album is Hate. Too slow for my liking and sounding kind of uninspired compared to the rest of the album. My top 5 songs from this album would be Lost Control, Chemical Heart, Gone Tomorrow, No Reason, and 1,000 Miles, with 1,000 Miles being the clear standout for the inspired main riff and energetic pace. A supporting tour followed throughout Australia and New Zealand across 2002 and 2003, with the band becoming regulars at major festivals including Big Day Out all over Australia. The Boys released a 4th EP in March of 2003 titled Panic Attack, containing a cover of Don't Change by Nick Sess, amongst others. McKellar handled production again, with the EP coming in at number 13. Between more touring, the band were hard at work writing Album 4. The lead single released in August of 2004, titled Hard Act to Follow. The single charted at 24. Thrills, Kills and Sunday Pills released in September of 2004 under Universal, with Howard Benson handling production. Benson had previously produced for Motorhead and Less Than Jake. The album charted at number 4 and went platinum again, which is the 4th album in a row to achieve platinum certification. The other singles off of the album did well, with Better Off Alone charting at 30, Hold On Me charting at 44, and Bleed You Dry charting at 67. The album took out Best Rock Album at the 2005 ARIA Awards. This is one of my least favourite Grinners albums, with a few lackluster tracks including Rising Tide, She's Leaving Tuesday, and Nylon. The top 5 for me are Hard Act to Follow, Hold On Me, Bleed You Dry, Better Off Alone, and Kiss It. This is the point for me personally where the album's become very uneven, with a lot of slower ballad type songs coming in, which is a far cry from Guide to Better Living. The band admitted to this, making the conscious decision to seek a new audience and reject any song that sounded anything like their previous work. A very bold move, but one that they could clearly afford to make, given that they'd had 4 platinum albums in a row. Grinspoon were big enough now to play at the NRL Grand Final in 2004. Extensive touring across Australia took place between 2004 and 2006, with a few notable performances including the 2006 Commonwealth Games closing ceremony in Melbourne, including a headline slot at the first Thank God It's Over festival. In between all the touring, the band put out Best in Show in November of 2005, a compilation album including the hits and a new unreleased song called Sweet as Sugar, which is one of my favourites as well. The album peaked at number 12 and went gold. I've got very fond memories of this album, as it was my first real introduction to the band's entire back catalogue of hits, having only really heard Chemical Heart and Hard Act to Follow beforehand. I was absolutely hooked and a fan for life after hearing Champion, Just Ace, More Than You Are, Secrets, and 1,000 Miles. It wasn't all smooth sailing, however, as Jameson was struggling with substance abuse after years of living the rock and roll lifestyle. In February of 2007, Jameson admitted himself into rehab for his ice addiction. Later that year, after his recovery in July, Jameson admitted to his personal struggles, which included adultery and stealing money from band members, on Andrew Denton's TV show Enough Rope. It was clear that Phil was in a better place now, and the band were continuing to work on album number 5, which wrapped up earlier on in the year. Black Tattoo, released in June, is the first single, which charted at 45, one of the better songs off of another very uneven album. Alibis and Other Lies, released in July with the band and Ramesh Satia handling production. Ramesh had previously worked with the band on their very first EP. The band were trying to capture a similar sound to Guide to Better Living, however this didn't go exactly to plan. Alibis charted at number 2 and was the last album to be released under the Universal and Grudge labels under contract. The album received a gold certification again. Critics reviewed the album poorly, with a poor reception from fans. There are several stinkers here, including Leave It, Melted Holiday, and Find Your Own Way. With songs like this, they were so far off the mark of what fans fell in love with, it makes me wonder why they lied about trying to capture their earlier sound. There are some diamonds in the rough here, however, with Black Tattoo, Choir Boy, and What You Got, which sounds like they could fit in on New Detention to a degree. I don't often listen to this album for obvious reasons. 2007 saw a supporting tour for the album. In early 2008, Grinspoon announced that they were going on hiatus after they finished their Big Day Out run. This hiatus lasted a whopping 2 months before the band were back again playing a festival in March. 2 months after that, they announced they were playing more shows and working on album number 6. Between working on their own material, Grinspoon covered St. Louis by the Easy Beats for a tribute album, with the band also contributing their own song Blind Lead Blind for a compilation CD titled Caution Life Ahead for the Buttery Drug and Alcohol Rehab Centre, which included other Aussie acts including The Living End. The album was released in November of 2008. Grinspoon were true to their word, playing several shows across 2008 and 2009, with one of the highlights being the Splendour in the Grass Festival in July of 2009. With a 2-year gap between albums, it was time for another. Album 6, titled 6 to Midnight, was released in September of 2009 under Chick Chick Boom Records and Universal Music. Grinspoon and Rick Will handled production, with Will previously working with No Doubt and Nine Inch Nails, with the album charting at number 6. Critics were all over the place on this one, with some outlets scoring 8 out of 10, with others scoring unfavourable or mixed. A few singles were released including Dogs, Come Back, Summer, and Premonitions. For me personally, this was the best album Grinners had written in years, somewhere between Thrills and New Detention. There's a lot of straight up hard hitting riffs on display here. Summer is the only track that I don't really like, with everything else being pretty much unskippable. The top 5 songs for me personally would be Dogs, Run, Come Back, Passenger, and Surrender. Unfortunately, this album failed to chart and was the end of their certification run. The band set off on a more intimate supporting tour, playing smaller venues for the most part across Australia and New Zealand. 2010 through to 2011 saw more touring as well. By the latter half of 2011, the boys had announced that they were working on album number 7 while touring through the rest of 2011. In the first half of 2012, the band set off for the States for about a month to record. Black Rabbits, released in September of 2012 under Universal, with Dave Schiffman handling production, who had previously worked with Anti-Flag. The album charted at number 8, with Passerby and Branded releasing as singles. Critics were mixed again. Much like Alibis, this is one of my least favourite albums. They mostly ditched the hard-hitting rock for lighter songs focusing on melody instead. There's plenty here that I don't like, so it would be easier to list the couple that I do, and these include Emergency and Tightrope. The band played a few shows to end 2012 with a large tour, including festival slots in 2013. In December of 2013, a second hiatus was announced. This time, they were true to their word, taking an almost 2-year break. By August of 2015, Grinspoon were back for a bit with a run of shows opening for Cold Chisel, with the tour taking place in December of the same year. 2016 was a continuation of the hiatus. In 2017, Grinspoon were back again to celebrate the re-release and 20th anniversary edition of Guide to Better Living with a supporting tour of Australia. The boys were truly back again. 2018 saw a run of festival shows including Groove and the Moo, with 2019 being another big year with the release of their second compilation album in October, titled Chemical Hearts, which charted at number 9. The Chemical Hearts tour took place in October and November. Before the world turned upside down in 2020, Grinners were able to play a few shows before going into lockdown. The world opened up in full again in 2021, so Grinspoon hit the road playing festivals including Spring Loaded and also some regular touring through 2022 and 2023. Jameson released a solo album in 2022 titled Somebody Else, an album full of forgettable pop rock songs. By 2024, it had been about 12 years since the band had put out an album full of new material. The drought was about to be broken. In May of 2024, Unknown Pretenders released as a single. I was cautiously optimistic that Grinspoon were going to put out another solid album. Unknown Pretenders brings the riffs back, which were sorely lacking from Black Rabbits. The world didn't have to wait long, with album 8 titled Whatever Whatever releasing in August of 2024 under Universal again. The album charted at number 3, with Oscar Dawson handling production. Critics and fans alike were pretty happy, with this one going back to their old sound of hard-hitting rock music. Blood on the Snow and the mostly ambient interlude tracks aren't that great, but everything else is very solid. To me, this whole album is a culmination of the previous 7 albums. You've got the heavier tracks with I Love You So Much and Unknown Pretender, and you've got the softer and more melodic tracks with 4, 5 and 7 and The Only One. If I'm in the mood for a bit of everything Grinspoon, this is my go-to. A top 5 list for this album would include I Love You So Much, Unknown Pretenders, Nasty, 4, 5 and 7 and The Only One. After releasing one of the best Aussie rock albums of 2024, the band set off on a 45-date tour of Australia. After many years, I finally got to see Grinspoon live. They were every bit as good as I'd hoped for. I even caught one of Pat Davin's picks to finish off the night. Grinspoon are still touring in 2025, embarking on a 30th anniversary tour in the latter half of the year. So, what does the internet have to say about Grinspoon? Over on the grunge subreddit, there's a discussion about Grinspoon. One user says, early Grinspoon goes hard, with another user responding by saying, the album they released this year goes pretty hard too. Not as heavy as Guide to Better Living, but still pretty heavy. I recommend giving it a listen if you haven't heard it yet. Over on YouTube, in the comments section of an audio upload of Champion, there's a lot of reminiscing going on about where the different users had heard the song or how they found their way to the video. One user says, 19 years later, I still want to be a champion, with another saying, I remember hearing this song on a Krusty Demons video. I searched for their album in the States, but it wasn't available. I ended up in Perth, Australia, and found this album in a record store. Guide to Better Living was an amazing album. Grinspoon are one of the best rock bands to come out of Australia that have stood the test of time for nearly 3 decades without a single lineup change, which is one hell of a run. Their first 3 albums achieved platinum status, with the next 2 going gold, with a dip in quality for a while there. Despite the band struggling to break out of Australia, Jameson's personal struggles with substance abuse, and the band going on hiatus twice, there's still a lot of love for Grinspoon today at home, with a successful album release in 2024 and sold-out shows around the country due to their incredible live performances. Grinspoon are one of my favourite bands and won't be forgotten anytime soon. Thanks for watching.